Hey guys, welcome back. It's Jay here, and a question that's floated around out there, and I've seen it, is can a Christian be a goth? Well, let me not only answer the question, but I'll also give you my testimony with that. So, absolutely, you can be a Christian and be a goth. Okay, the goth scene does not cater to one particular religion. You have your cliche that, oh, goths are Satanists and, into witchcraft. Okay, yeah, there's going to be some goths that are into that and do practice those particular beliefs, but not all of them. Okay, so goth is not, it does not cater to a particular religion. It's, open to all religions. So, goth is, it's almost like a human art form. Okay, it's the subculture. There's music, literature, fashion. It's all a part of it. So absolutely, you can be whatever belief system you want, and be involved in the subculture. So to go along with that, yes, I am a goth. I am a Christian. More importantly, I'm a Christian, and also I do float around various subcultures into goth, metal. I'd say I'm kind of 50-50 on that. I'll be a metalhead, I'll also be a goth. So I'll give you a little bit of my background, okay? Put on my bifocals as I go through. I grew up in a Christian home. I accepted Christ at age 5 during a Billy Graham crusade. And at the time, it's funny, even as a kid, I was just like, I read my Bible book and I was like, hey, like, what is this about Jesus, accepting him? And, I was like, this is like the missing key to like my Bible book. I was like, this is the last step I got to do to like, whatever, achievement unlocked. So I accepted Christ at age 5, at a young age, and grew up in a Christian home. So I grew up going to Christian school, but I also kind of float around a couple of different schools. So early on, I'd been in like a public school, or I went Christian school, public school, Christian school. So, but a big chunk of my life, from 2nd grade up until 9th, I had been in a Christian school. So that was a pretty big chunk of my life. It was a small school, probably maybe at the beginning there was only like 25, 30 kids in 2 classes. So there was only 50 of us, so we all knew each other pretty well, and so we kind of grew up together. So at the time, by the end of my tenure there, between like 8th and 9th grade, so this would have been around 2001, 2002, I had been exposed to like Savior Machine and like The Awakening back in like the late 90s, but I wasn't super into it. Now Savior Machine though, the way they looked, that was a big impact on me, because I was like, oh, I want to look like that, but I never really took the action. I just kind of, at the time, I just kind of admired it. It was something like, oh, maybe I'll do it when I'm older or something. I don't know what the reasoning was, but as a 10-year-old, you don't really, you get distracted by things. Anyway, so in the early 2000s, I had it where I was in 9th grade. I was like, oh, I'm a loser, whatever. And I just remember at one point I was like, you know what? I really like this gothic scene. At the time, of course, it was like your mall goth, your baby bats. I was like, oh, I really like this. I want to dress like this. And so I made this commitment. I like started buying some of the clothes or whatever. And nothing expensive, just black clothes. But I'd wear all black. I'd paint my nails black. And so I wanted to grow my hair out. And it was like, whatever. I guess it was like a little bit shorter than this back then. But that's kind of what initiated everything. And oh my gosh, I painted my nails black with like magic marker, and everyone in the school, the teachers, just freaked out. Oh no, like you're gonna go to the occult. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, this is ridiculous. And at the time, I was primarily listening to like Christian metal, like Demon Hunter, Living Sacrifice, and stuff like that. I think that winter, that's when I got my first Schleckvox CD. So like I was just kind of getting into like the underground music, like a lot, like into it, like, and so these folks freaked out. It's hilarious too because this is a school in the big city. This is in Philadelphia, and so anywho, that was that. And to top it all off, I was a bit of a rascal. I was a troublemaker. I got into trouble. Teachers were like, don't hang out with that one. That one's, and in the end, what was going on was, I was hurting inside. I was like, oh, no one likes me. I'm a loser. And also at that point, I didn't have, I don't know. As a teenager, my brain was focused and prioritized stupid crap like, well, I want a girlfriend, I want to be cool, I want to fit in, I want to do sports good, and these were my priorities when my relationship with God was struggling. So and to top it off, there were family matters going on, so it was bad. So I had it where I said, I'm gonna leave the school. I'm done with y'all. Like, my core group of friends stuck by me. Love those folks that stuck by me, and many of them I'm friends to this day, and they're like family to me. So, but when the principals and everybody were giving me grief, it sucked. And it's funny because at the time there was a Charisma magazine, and they had an article on Goths, and so this Christian magazine had this article on Goths, and it featured Christian Goths in it. And so I remember showing it to the principal because I got in trouble for something, and I was like, hey, like, people are giving me crap about the way I look, and like, here you go. Like, you can look like this and be a Christian. And so lo and behold, that teacher principal resigned like the next week. I'm like, dang it, I finally got through the one person, and then they were gone or got fired or something. So, oh well, I hit the road, and I left the school and I went to public school. Now, I don't know if y'all remember the movie from that time frame called The New Guy, but that pretty much was me. That summer, I bought all these goth clothes and everything else I could, everything in black, and I went into school and I was like, I gotta find my clique. So I ran into that crowd, punkers, we all kind of called each other the freaky kids because it wasn't really, goth. A lot of them primarily listened to like hard rock, like Korn and like Godsmack. It wasn't really like, goth. So we were just the freaky kids, and we all hung out, and that was that. So the funniest thing is, from my past, I was still like somewhat of an athlete. So at gym time, they're like, oh, what do you want to play? Like competitive basketball or fun basketball? And I'm like, my friends are like, yeah, come over here. I'm like, yeah, I'll go over to competitive. And so I go over there and I start killing it on the court. And they're like, dude, what are you doing? Like, I'm like, look, last year I played on my former school's team. Like, I like playing sports. So it was funny, but at one point the coaches are like, hey, you want to try out for the team? I'm like, well, I don't, it's not really my thing. And I was like, hey, I want to start doing music. So my emphasis was becoming a musician and starting a band. So I met my band members while starting to go to concerts and stuff, and joined a death thrash metal band. So that's my metal story. So, and we'll leave that for something else, but for another time. But anywho, more importantly, at that time, I turned my back on my faith, and I didn't really care about my walk with Christ. The main thing was just being cool and all that other stuff, high school, being cool. So anyway, a big change for me was when I went to London between junior year and senior year. I was 18. And I went over to London and met a bunch of Christian black metal, death metal bands and people into the music. And from there, I was like, whoa, like here are guys that are into the music, but they have a solid faith. And it made me realize, I'm like, wow, like I've been missing out on this. So it didn't hit right away, but it took some time. So went to college, my band was going, and went full force with that. A big thing was between my colleges, when my band broke up, I started working full-time at a steel plant and made a lot of money, but I was depressed and everything else, and I started taking my Bible to work, and I was like, man, like I've been missing out on this all along. So that really grew my faith. And then 2009, I went to Germany, went to Mera Luna Festival, and that blew my mind. And then the following year, this is where things really got incredible and awesome as far as networking, especially as social media changed over in the 2000s. You could meet folks that were Christians, that were Goths, all across the globe. And so social media allowed for that to happen. Is really awesome. So 2010, I ended up communicating to an individual, Lady Michaela, who ran ChristianGoth.com. So if you folks have seen that website, mad props. But she threw a Gothic picnic. So I was able to meet a bunch of folks that were believers that were into the goth and industrial and metal too, into those scenes. And after that network, the following year, I ended up going to this event called Gothicon. And it was this gathering of Christian Goths from all over, and we all met in Cincinnati. And the organizer, Goth Mom Donna, she was the one that coordinated everything. And there were bands, and there were folks from all over, and we all it was just an amazing experience, just surrounded by Christians that were in the goth scene, and everybody sharing and talking. But one of the key things that I learned from that was from Pastor David Hart, and also Eric from Savior Machine was there, and during one of the Q&As and everything, and some of the sessions of talking and giving testimonies, etc., he was saying, hey, like if you're in the major cities and you're in the scene, the best way to spread the word, just is by, just loving one another and being a good influence. And I was like, dang, that really called me out, because, I had friends in the goth scene, but man, like I would be a complainer and be like, man, the traffic was terrible and all this, and these people stink, and just, talking trash and just being a goof. And I'm like, man, like I really have missed the bar with this, I gotta, I should be there for people more, I should be trying to be a better friend. That's really what I got out of that. That was a great, a great lesson learned from there. From there, 2012 went out to Cornerstone, and once again, a lot of the folks that were at Gothicon were there in Cornerstone with the Asylum. And lo and behold, I ended up, some circumstances happened, and I ended up performing my band's material there, and just had a great time. Tons of bands and tons of folks in the metal and goth scenes and punk scenes, and just, it was a great celebration of not only Christ, but the body of Christ, So it was incredible. So from there, joined the military, of course, and that really strengthened my faith, especially beforehand. I was like, you know what, my goal is to be a really, a great influence on folks, and to do the right thing, and to look after people. And so I went to basic training. I was like, oh. But man, it was a great, as far as my spiritual walk, it was a great experience, because I'd pray with folks and we'd talk about things and everything, talk about God. That really strengthened my faith. And then yeah, that was my journey from there, living down in Florida, and then was able to participate in a couple of audio feeds event. And 2014 in particular was just, what a great year for that. I was able to play my band's material during a masquerade ball, and just, we all were having fun. My wife had a great time, and it was just a awesome experience. And so all you folks out there, and since then, social media has been a great tool of connecting. And so I've been able to connect and speak with folks all over the country and across the globe that are into the scene, and that are believers. And I know it's a small scene, so it's great being able to connect. So going along with that, a couple of things just to note. Some closing topics. Some of the biggest things are, in my experience, there's been two different types of Gothic Christians. there's been folks that kind of live in rural communities, and these folks are Goths, and they go to church and they're the only one. And a lot of times they face persecution from the church, and they're like, man, this stinks, and these folks, they don't accept me for who I am, etc. I've met a lot of folks like that in the Christian music scene. And now a lot of those folks I've noticed, because they're so isolated, they don't really know much about the mainstream goth scene, because they just haven't experienced major club events and a lot of the the traditional bands, the mainstream bands, and they're primarily into the Christian artists, and that's kind of all they know, the Christian artists and the Christian scene. I'm not trying to knock it. I'm just saying, hey, like, everybody's got different missions for God, and in those circumstances, I feel like those folks, it's kind of the church accepting them for who they are and having that image, yet showing on the inside that they're followers of Christ. It's Christ himself that says, hey, I'm looking inwardly. So jumping onto that, I can relate to you. I've experienced that even in the big city. I've experienced being ostracized, perhaps from for how I looked, by fellow believers, and turn my back on it until years later. At the same time, I've also met folks, and this is kind of more of the category I'm in, where they're big city folks and they go to club events, so they're in the goth scene, and so they know many people that are into the scene and various things, but they are not believers. So, and they may know other believers, but I'm more in that category. And the main ministry for y'all, because you go to events and stuff, is to be that influence and to shine that light in the darkness, be a good friend and care about people. And so that's your gift right there, when you get to go to club events and meet different people. And so stand firm in your beliefs, okay? Even when other people are knocking it, hey, this is your God is more important than that, okay? Acceptance and all that other stuff, God is way more important than that. So if people are knocking you for your beliefs in the scene, hey, just brush it off. And so all you can do is, love them and forgive them for what they're doing. So who knows what's going on in their lives. So there are a lot of great bands out there. One of my big things is, maybe it's me as a history guy, but if you're a Christian and you want to get into goth, do your research. Wikipedia goth, okay, it's right there. And don't, make sure you're clicking the right stuff, because you could get the Germanic tribes, and even though that's good stuff to learn,